seem good for everybody? All righty. Well, greetings everybody. I am thrilled to see some faces I recognize and ones that I don't recognize, so welcome. I'm Linda Marston Reed. I'm the Executive Director of Arts Mid-Hudson, and we are just really thrilled and honored to be hosting this tonight. And before we get started, I want you to know we're recording the event just in case we need to share it out with people that couldn't make it tonight. So you'll be able to refer people to it that didn't see it. So again, thank you again for being here on this very auspicious day when we remember and celebrate the life of Martin Luther King Jr. For many people, today is also a day of service in their community. And this was spurred into action during one of Martin Luther King's speaking events when he asked, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" Systems of oppression have been built into the structure of our society, yet with all the horrifying events of the past year, we have seen opportunities to make changes for a more just society. In tonight's presentation, we will see how a true artivist can bring this call to action to our community. I am honored to introduce poet, author, performer, songwriter, community artivist, and speaker, Bettina Poet Gold Wilkerson. She pushes the boundaries of poetry and the spoken word. She is quite simply an activist of the heart. Appointed the 2017 and 2018 Dutchess County Poet Laureate, Poet Gold is the recipient of numerous awards. With countless recitations, she is open for Grammy-nominated artists and has been featured as a speaker at organizations such as the Omega Institute and the Self-Employment in the Arts. Presently, she is the co-host for the iHeartRadio podcast, Finding Out with Pete and Poet Gold. Her distinct voice will be heard playing the role of God in the upcoming animated short film, The Creation, a poem by James Weldon Johnson, directed by award-winning animated filmmaker Steve Lieber. Her inspirational words explore the essence of humanity living a peaceful existence. Tonight's video was produced and directed by Frank Matheis, a music, visual arts, culture writer, producer, and photographer. His latest project was the book Sweet Bitter Blues, co-written with National Heritage Fellow Phil Wiggins. His Hammond Museum column, In Other Words, features member artists in all disciplines, and he is also a contributing writer to Arts Westchester, Living Blues Magazine, and thecountryblues.com. And now we're going to go to the video, What Would Martin Say? Yeah. Get comfy.
Build a wall, lock 'em up, kill them. 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 Kill them. Kill them. Kill them. I wonder what Martin would say about 45's mantra today. 2018 marks 150 years of the KKK, and it seems mass incarceration is still okay. I wonder what Martin would say about chalk lines designed by limbs attached to long arms of the law. Don't flinch. You will be gunpowder lynched. I wonder what Martin would say about our advanced technology, yet we live with conflicted ideologies. Claim of speaking to the heartland while missing the heart of the land, where the innocents have bled from native union to the black man, the underserved and the poor still in need of more. I wonder what Martin would say. Is he turning in his grave? Gone too soon. Unfinished work swept under the rug, and now the White House has been mugged by a thug. I wonder what Martin would say about the oligarchy today. Their foot pressed against our throat and we choke, suffocated in the fog of their blindness, lack of empathy and kindness. There is no beautiful way to paint the present landscape. I wonder what Martin would say. Maybe that we've made some strides. Surely that would make us feel better inside. Time to face the truth, stop living in a lie. There's still work to be done, we can't deny. Build a wall, lock 'em up, kill them. 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 Kill them. Kill them. Kill them. I wonder what Martin would say. Maybe he would tell us to stand heart to heart and be more brave.
Poet Gold, thank you very much for sharing that very moving poem with us tonight. We have some questions that have been sent in advance, and we also have, I'm sure people will be giving us some new questions and some comments. And again, for anybody who would like to ask a question or make a comment, if you're on Zoom, you can go to the chat box, which is generally, if you move your cursor down to the bottom of your screen, you will see it, it'll say chat. So I think we could go to the first question.
Okay. Our first question is, how did this project come about?
First and foremost, I want to say thank you to everyone who's here on Zoom with me and as well as on Facebook. So how did the project come about? I was actually commissioned by Vassar College History Department, Maria Home. It was the 50th anniversary of the murder of Dr. King, the assassination of Dr. King. And she asked me to write a poem about, you know, the event that was taking place. And I wanted to, within the body of the poem, point out, yes, some of the things that we've accomplished, but also point out our stark reality of what is and all the work that's still undone. So hope that answered the question.
Yes. Okay, our next question. How do we decolonize and join hands across perceived lines of separation, race, ethnicity, religion, and age?
That's a great question. Give it to me one more time, so I want to sink this in.
Of course.
Thank
How
you.
do we decolonize and join hands across perceived lines of separation, race, ethnicity, religion, and even age?
Exposure. I think what happens often with us in life, and even with children, is the lack of exposure. When we are exposed to something other than ourselves, other than the box that we've put ourselves into, we can then obtain an appreciation for each other. But if you stay within the box, if you don't take your child to meet other people, to embrace different cultures, then then we're never really going to change. It's really about exposure. You know, I went to prep school as a child, and I got a lot of exposure to the arts and just things that weren't happening necessarily in my neighborhood. And I reflect on that a lot. And one of the nonprofits that I used to work with, one of the main things that the executive director wanted us to do was to take the children outside of where we live in Poughkeepsie and expose them to the museum in New York, expose them to theater, expose them to the arts and different neighborhoods and different culture so that they can have an actual experience beyond a film. And I think exposure is key, is key.
So off of that, how has the arts contributed to social justice causes?
I'm going to defer that to Frank. Frank Matheis, who is the director of this film, this piece. And so, Frank, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Oh, well, hello, everybody. That's a hard question. You know, I think that certainly the arts, be it visual, theatrical, musical, have always had a powerful impact on social justice. And I think, you know, I do a lot with music, and I would think immediately about the power of song, going back to Woody Guthrie, and even before him, Pete Seeger, Bob Dylan, Joan Baez. When you think about the peace songs, the songs about social justice, Bob Dylan's, you know, Masters of War, many other kinds of songs, but also certainly it visually, the visual arts have had a powerful impact on many levels. You know, the danger of that is when it is pushed too far artistically, be it in propaganda posters or musically, when music is used as a tool, such as in racist rock music, which is very powerful now. You know, it works both directions. So there is a danger there as well as anything else. But certainly I think that music, more than anything, has carried through with anthems for peace movements, for civil rights. You know, Joan Baez sang when Martin Luther King spoke, along with Bob Dylan, Mahalia Jackson, and many others. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so our next question, and these all came in through the form, the RSVP form that you all signed up on.
Okay.
What would Dr. King's advice be for converting or confronting the new generation of militant Christian white supremacists?
I don't think it would be much different than what it was then. You know, Dr. King was a deep admirer and student, so to speak, of Gandhi as well. And it was based on the principle of satyagraha, a Christian principle for passive political resistance. And there were three truths to that. One was the truth, the other one was self-sacrifice, and the refusal to do harm. And I don't think that he would really sway much from that, you know, regardless, because the racism today is still the racism from yesterday. You know, what we saw on January 6th was really no different than what we've experienced as African Americans and Black people in America. And so I think that I thank God for technology, for sure, because it's really brought things to the forefront. Some of these things have taken place in the 80s and the 90s. There were still church burnings going on in Georgia. I mean, I've been on the phone with my cousin when there's a church burning going on. And I said, that still happens? He says, yes, but it doesn't make the front news. So I think the path to resistance would still, you know, be the same for him.
And while we're talking about present day, who living today do you think best reflects the words and work of Dr. Martin Luther King?
That's tough. That's tough.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's any one body. I sort of look at it like Jesus and the apostles. There are a lot of apostles, you know. There's Farrah Gray that I'm a great fan of out of Chicago. There's Dr. Cornel West. You know, we lost the voice of Maya Angelou. I mean, there are a number of voices. There are a number of new voices, the founders of Black Lives Matter. People may not necessarily agree with what they fear as their statement, but the basis of what they're putting out there is still the same. It's protest. It's how do we resist this in a non-violent way, which may appear to be violent and radical to a system, but the intention is not to be violent physically as we like to, you know, we define violence.
And our next question is for Frank. Why did you choose to shoot this video in black and white?
Okay. Of course, you know, I've known Gold a long time, and we've done things together in the past. And this particular poem just touched me immediately. And once I heard it said, I felt that black and white added a level of drama, and also the triangle of the visual to the drummer, the djembe drummer, Brian Henry, who was really added a lot, I think, to the song. So the question is, you know, how to bring that drama in the forefront. And I thought with black and white and with that type of lighting, very subdued lighting, very much contouring the poet during her performance, I thought added the most drama to what I think is a very dramatic, a very deep, and a very incisive poem.
Thank you. Okay, so our next question is, what was your first memory of Dr. Martin Luther King, and specifically, when did you understand his significance to you and to as part of your community?
Oh, wow. Oh, my first memory of Dr. Martin Luther King. I don't know. You know, I think for me, it was more of a voice. You know, I have a dream that, you know, that spoke to me. His assassination, you know, came on the tails of so many being assassinated. Bobby, the Kennedys, then Malcolm, you know, after. And so I don't have a specific time in my life. I always like to say that I'm a child of Martin, you know, as far as what I've always embodied in me. It just, his just life, his presence, you know, alone just was just, I don't know, it just really, it's hard for me to really pinpoint the moment that I can recall. It was almost as if, for me, he was always present, and is still always present. It's still always present. I hope that answered the question. I know it was all over the place.
No, and well, I wonder, Frank, do you have any thoughts about that when you first had your first memory of Dr. Martin Luther King?
Yes, you know, I recall distinctly, you know, I'm from Germany. I came to the United States in 1969. And I remember as a kid distinctly seeing on television, not only the speeches that he gave, but the violence that surrounded him at the time. And as a young boy, that made a huge impression on me, to see that kind of injustice played out on the television. People being hit with sticks by the police, sprayed with water cannons, police dogs sicked on them, children being abused when they tried to go to school. You know, these were things that touched me. But most importantly, when I came to the United States at age 13, I went to the area of Washington, D.C., and that was right after the terrible riots that took place in the city after the assassination of Dr. King. And I remember distinctly people saying, you know, he's a communist and he's a troublemaker. And, you know, it seemed so wrong to me. And the entire thing was so terribly unjust. And, you know, the reality is that Dr. King had essentially been under surveillance by his own government, and propaganda was spread about him. They investigated his personal life in order to bring him down. But he persevered, he succeeded, because his message was one of peace. It was one of harmony, but it also was one of resistance through peaceful means. And, you know, he taught me a lot and impacted my life greatly as a consequence. Thank you.
And I think a lot of people get confused when they say, you know, Dr. King's. Oftentimes they say, well, I'm more of a Malcolm, you know, than a King, and they both have their different methodologies, you know. But Dr. King, yes, he was into, let's say, turn the other cheek, but he was turn the other cheek and let's just develop a different methodology that was still going to have a longer lasting impact than violence. I mean, look at what boycotts have done. Look at what protests can do, and the many changes that a protest, when there's a power in numbers versus in guns. And so yeah, that's, you know, that's just something that always stuck with me. I mean, even as a child, and becoming a wordsmith, and using words in the hood so that I didn't have to fight, but learning how to diffuse a situation at a young age, and that I really got from him. You know, let me learn how to speak to your heart. Let me learn how to speak to your humanity, versus put up my fist. You know, because I don't want any scratch marks on my face, and I'm sure you don't either. So, you know, why can't we just talk this out?
Okay, our next question is, how has Dr. Martin Luther King impacted your environment, your community?
Well, a lot of my work is, whether consciously or subconsciously, built around nonviolence. I work with a nonprofit out in Staten Island, a Sundog Theater, and they have a great program, anti-violence arts program called The Soundtrack of Life, designed by a friend of mine who was gracious enough to invite me to be a part of it. And I think I've been with them now for 3 or 4 years. I'm not quite sure, but and they take this to the schools throughout Staten Island and New York, and it was such a breath of fresh air to be engaged in a project that spoke to my heart in that capacity, where you're going in through the arts, getting youth to say really what's on their mind, honestly, without any judgment whatsoever, and then watch them transform. A young lady one day, this was after the program, I think it was probably the next year, I bumped into her, and she stopped me in Staten Island. She stopped me on the hill, and she said, Miss Gold. And I was like, yeah, what's going on? It's good to see you. And she said, I want to thank you. And I said, well, thank me for what? And she said, you know, through this poetry thing that we did, I learned how to take constructive criticism. Because before this group, I would have punched somebody in the face had they said anything about my work. You know, and that was huge. That was huge. She articulated the way that she needed to articulate it, but the point was made. And so, so Dr. King shaped me in this way for my art to be of service, for me to serve. And those are the lanes, you know, when I moved back from the music business, was because I really couldn't find a healthy lane to serve in. And so yeah, so it allows me to serve, taught me how to serve.
Thank you. Our next question, in what ways, well, this goes along with what you just asked, but maybe it is kind of the same question. In what ways are you living your life to manifest Dr. Martin Luther King's dream?
Yeah, same answer.
Yeah. And then circling back to what we talked about at the beginning, what is the significance of Dr. Martin Luther King's teachings in the world today?
Frank, you want to take that and I'll come back to it?
Yes, well, that's a tough question. You would think that it should be embraced by everyone who professes to be a Christian, because, at its foundation, it's Judeo-Christian thinking. He was also very inspired by Gandhi's teachings of nonviolence. Yet, if you looked at the television today, for example, we saw people in the Capitol who had, essentially made an insurrection in the capital of the United States, and they've gone in there to take it over and intimidate and harass people. And they did that while carrying the flag of Jesus and talking about, taking prayers there and pretending essentially to claim Christianity. But if you listened to the teachings of Martin Luther King, and if you look at the impact that he had on nonviolent resistance and, the principles that he taught, he stuck to them. They are real, they are true. Whether people accept them or really understood them outside of the African American community, I think they are many, but not enough. And I think that the divisions in the United States today are proof of that. That, if only people, to paraphrase my friend Pete Seeger, when will they ever learn? And, we can't, in these times, rejoice and say, well, we've done it. I think what we have to do is, embolden ourselves with this important message that he had against hate. And I think we, who already believe what he said, we have to embrace the idea of not hating and not becoming like those who hate and condemn us. Thank you.
I agree, Frank. It's sort of what I call selfishly selfless. You hold on to the core of what's going to make you happy. And quite frankly speaking, hate is not something ultimately that makes you happy. I think that we can get caught there because we lose our overall sense of belonging, or our sense of belonging becomes a little warped, because we all want to be part of something greater than ourselves. But sometimes it becomes a little unhealthy. And that's when you can have the manifestation of a Donald Trump or David Koresh or a Jim Jones or a Hitler, because your sense of self has gotten lost. And when you're dealing with marginalized community like poor white, because this is what was there, those voices that feel like they're not being heard, the voices of the Appalachian, the voices of those in West Virginia, the voices of that I've seen in places in the backwoods of Pennsylvania, where people don't even have a toilet in their home. When that's not being shown across America, and yet you have the faces of poor Black and brown that's constantly being shown as the face of being poor, when we know it's a lie, but yes, we've received a great social injustice. You have marginalized different groups that can easily get swept up into wanting to belong to something. And they get swept up into that hate, and they get swept up by their pain. And this is what happens. It's no different. When I looked at January 6th, it was no different in some way of a child who joins a gang. A child who joins a gang is in a gang because they're looking for a place to belong. Those folks, as warped as it was, felt like they belonged to something greater than themselves. And we all know it was unhealthy. We all can see it's unhealthy. But it's the same unhealthy place as the child who joins a street gang. And it's all operating out of a place of fear, out of a place of survival, out of a place of us and them. You know, you have something on your plate that I want, and I want that. And it's that place. And if we can, you know, my family picks on me because they say, you know, when Go moves into a neighborhood, she knows the whole block. Like I've been, you know, I've been living here 8 years and I don't know anybody yet. She knows the whole block. And, you know, there's a reason for that. I want to know my neighbor. I want to know my neighbor because your problem will eventually become my problem. If you're home starving, if you can't pay your mortgage, if something's going on in your house, it will, and I don't know about it, it's eventually going to show up on my door, or it'll show up on someone else's door. You know, when you look at the heroin movement, I'll be honest, I had a little bit of resentment when all the posters were coming out and because heroin had reached middle America. Well, I had people in my family on heroin. Where were the posters then? And so, you know, I think that we're in a good place in some warped kind of way. And I hopefully that we'll stay awake and do the work, as Frank says, embrace it, not fear it. I think part of the fear is the fact that we just don't want to embrace it, which is what Martin refers to as truth. What is the truth of it all? And what is the work that everyone's prepared to do? What is the sacrifice? Are you willing to boycott something? Are you willing to go not have your favorite meal? Are you willing to turn off Channel 5, period? Because Fox News exists. But you can't boycott Fox because you don't watch Fox, but you can boycott your favorite show on Channel 5. And that'll get them to take off Fox. What are you willing to sacrifice?
Thank you. So I have one last question. Thank you both, Gold and Frank, so much for giving us your thoughts and sharing this beautiful piece with us. The last question we have from our audience is, how do we heal?
Love, you know, loving yourself a little bit more, being kinder to yourself, not being afraid to say that you're afraid to yourself. I have, when I go into the classroom sometimes with students and I say, you know, the unique thing about us as human beings is that we have a fear of looking at ourselves in the mirror, really eye to eye. The eye is the key to the soul. What we see is often what we're about to become for the day. We put on the makeup, or we put on the nice suit, or we put on the bow tie. But we're not necessarily dealing with our truth of the moment. Am I happy? You know, am I resolved with who I am as a being? And if not, what do I have to do to change it? None of us are perfect. And if we can begin to have that honest conversation with ourselves, I believe that we can then have an honest conversation with other people. When we begin to recognize the fear within ourselves, we can easily see the fear in someone else. And then we will be more apt to embrace them because you know they're having some type of similar fear that you recognize. And you can let them know that you don't want them to be afraid alone. And so I think love, you know, true love. And we all know what that is inside of us.
Thank you, Gold. Frank, Frank, do you have any thoughts?
Add to that, please. You know, the thing that Martin Luther King tried to teach us is not to hate. You know, I've observed here in these last months, years under the current just leaving regime, that too many people ended up no different than those that they were complaining about. That, you know, King said, returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. But even among those of us who are right now still the the resistance, the people that are raising voices and in opposition to what has been done and said here over these last years. You know, too often I see us degrading and becoming just like those that we criticize. And I think that one lesson that the impact of Dr. King is that simple but true teaching. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. You know, and thank you for saying to me, let's do this. Because I just tell you a quick story. I had all these other ideas in my head, all these, what this poem was going to be, you know, and didn't know quite sure how to get there. And Frank said, no, and it was really humbling for me because I said to myself, Gold, someone is blessing you with a gift. And that was that, you know, and so thank you, Frank, for that conversation over sake. Thank you. And thank you guys for your willingness to do this. Linda, you know, Lilia, Melissa, thank you.
Well, I want to thank you, Poet Gold, and thank you, Frank, for such a beautiful night of thoughtful conversation from the heart. And it's not something that I think anybody that was here tonight will ever forget. So thank you. I'd also like to thank our Arts Mid-Hudson staff. So Lilia Perez was the person who was leading all the questions. Thank you very much, Lilia. And Melissa Dvorzina Thomas, who I don't know if anybody, she wasn't able to speak because she's on other duties, but she's juggling about 5 screens. So because of their work and technical expertise, we were able to do this. So we're very appreciative. We have an amazing, amazing staff. So as we close out tonight, but as we continue into this week, which should be a very auspicious week, let's just keep focused on what are we doing for others. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.